back. Let's go. It's another edition of the WobCast 2.0. I'm your host, Mike Wobschall. It's Wobby, it's Giles, and Chase, your crew, as usual, here to talk about another Vikings victory. Number 2 on the season. Your favorite football team moves to 2-1. It's episode 6, a gift from Detroit. That's right. It was a gift from Detroit. We'll get more into what we mean by that when we break down the game in segment 1 of the WobCast 2.0 episode 6. Also coming up today, things we liked, things that went well in that victory over Detroit. We'll take a look at the NFC North. We'll take a glance around the National Football League and look at some big storylines and headlines heading into week 4. And we'll also preview the Vikings' next game, which is against the New Orleans Saints. And it's not in New Orleans and it's not in Minnesota. The game is in London. So we'll talk all about that and much more here on the WobCast 2.0. Before we do all that, let me introduce you to my partners for the show. It's Giles and Chase. Hey, fellas, how's it going?
Doing great. Anytime we get another W, I'm all about that, because I went into this season knowing there was going to be some painful moments, some learning curves. Yep. However ugly that game might have been, we came out on top, which is the point. So we move forward.
Yeah, we do. Chase, I thought about you. As I'm watching the Chargers play the way they played and the Bengals play the way they played, and just that whole fun like preseason debate that we had. I think it was like episode 1 or 2 where we broke it down. So I thought I'd give you the floor here before we dig into Vikings victory over Detroit. Your thoughts on those two outcomes?
You know, it's a long season. It's a very long season. So okay. Yeah, you know what? If some of the best teams in the league are going to take up losses early, then wins and learns, and let's stack up the learns in the early part of the season. And I'm guessing they're still going to be around, come January. So
I think you're right. All right, let's get into this game here, Vikings-Lions, and what went well, things we liked. Before I'm not going to say I'm going to rain on the parade here, but I kind of am. But before we do that, let's be positive. So what we liked from this game, I got 3. I'm going to go first. And then you guys can react, or you can simply move on and talk about something that you liked. But I'm going to go sort of to an easy one because it's like the recency effect of what happened really late in the game. I thought sort of accentuates something that has been positive for like about a year, and that is KJ Osborne. He's not a household name, like even in Minnesota, I don't think. Maybe getting there a little bit more. And I'm not about to talk like, Reed Carter Moss or like anything like that. I'm not going there at all. But he's not nothing. KJ Osborne is not nothing. And, I think we can be critical of what Detroit did coverage-wise on that touchdown to KJ Osborne. But at the same time, the guy has to run fast, get open, make the catch, and be confident and have the confidence of his head coach and his quarterback to be out there in that spot. And so I really liked what I saw from KJ Osborne. And I actually thought the throw and catch that Cousins and Osborne made, the play before the game-winning play, was more impressive. But they got paid with the game winner. So KJ Osborne, to me, a big bright spot in the season for the Vikings.
Yeah, 100%. And when you look at KJ Osborne, if you take out the special teams aspect of his play, I know there's been some issues there historically. If you look at offense only, KJ has had only upside. I can't really think of any context where he has dropped the ball, literally or figuratively. He has been all that but upside. And when you're looking at your wide receiver 3, I think he is excelling in every category. You could make make an argument that he could be a second wide receiver on a lot of teams. And considering that you are 3rd in the depth chart, I think they've done a pretty decent job at factoring him into the scheme. So props to KJ.
Yeah, I agree. So before I get to my next one, Giles, something you loved.
Something I loved. I feel like I'm going to mince my words here a little bit, but Garrett Bradbury. What a guy. I mean, I don't know if you saw the PFF grades for this past season, or for this season. He's been okay throughout the season. Definitely not a good grade game 1. But against Detroit, he posted a 77.8 PFF grade overall. He had a 73.9 pass blocking PFF grade, which is phenomenal for someone like Garrett Bradbury. So I think there's two people that really get some kudos from that. And I think first is Kevin O'Connell and scheming him into that. I know a lot of people were nervous going into the season, as was I, that we are going to train wreck our season if we continue on with him at center.
Yeah.
But if this can continue, like that's going to put us into a decent position to go deep. And then obviously our offensive line coach has done a phenomenal job with him. Told him to put on some weight. And it is simply not a train wreck. When you look at the offensive line, it's a game of who is your weakest link. And historically, that's been Garrett Bradbury and the right guard. Now there's something to be chatted about with the right guard position, but if this can continue, I think we're headed on a good track.
Agreed. And actually, you sort of stepped into what my second one was, but I'll
sorry.
No, you're good. We're on the same page on this one. But I want Chase to chime in on something he liked before I move on to the next one.
Yeah, for sure. So for me, it's more of a general thing. And it's just the fact that we had that mental toughness to stick with it. I think we had a lot of games last year where there were these close games that we didn't play well, where it didn't, like as a fan, it didn't feel like, okay, we're not playing our best right now. I'm thinking about the Cardinals game last year, the Bengals game last year, and we lost the game.
Yep.
But after playing high school basketball for so long, I understand that a pretty loss is 10 times, an ugly win. Ugly win is so much better than a pretty loss. And the fact that we played bad and we realized that we were playing bad, but still got the win is such a big thing. I think it says a lot about our character and who we are as a team, that we can go out there and play bad, stick with it, and still win the game.
Yep.
Especially against an underrated team. A lot of people are sleeping on the lines. They are way better than people are projecting them to be.
Yeah, probably.
Over the last 10 games, I believe that they've averaged like 34 or 35 points a game. Like they're a high-scoring unit.
Okay, yeah, interesting. Well stated, Chase, and I'm going to dovetail off of that one in a few minutes. Your whole ugly win, pretty loss situation. My second one, Giles, was the offensive line overall, the offensive line. I'm thumbs up on them. I think we're maybe a little higher on them than we would be if like we were the Steelers or the Browns, who traditionally in the last decade have had good offensive lines, right? I think we would just feel okay about it, but we're coming from the bottom and working our way up. So I think that's why we feel good about where we're at. My last one is Johnny Munt. Like I know this is sort of like off the beaten path, but and he had a couple of drops in the Green Bay game. But O'Connell brought him here for a reason, is familiar with him and brought him here for a reason. And I just like him. I think he fits my eye. I think he's, no matter what offense you are or you run, I think he can help. And I'm not projecting him to be anything. I'm just saying I think he helps you win. You know, I like him. I think he's tough. I think he's versatile, and I think he's the type of guy you want on your team. And it's like, I use this analogy a lot with basketball, but it's like if you're playing pickup basketball, like there are some guys where it's like, yeah, I don't know, he's not the greatest player or whatever, but I just hate playing against him. Like I don't want to guard him. Like you know, and I think that's kind of he's the football version of that to me.
I would agree. And honestly, you can both compliment Johnny Munt and give Irv Smith some criticism. I think he did a decent job in the route running game, but he still obviously has some issues when it comes to catching the ball. And I think that is, if this continues, going to cost him another contract in purple, which is unfortunate because I think he had a tremendous upside. But if he continues this streak much longer, I think Johnny Munt is going to be far more of a tight end one than people may have projected going into the season.
Yeah.
So I have another one. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That empties the notebook for me on things that we liked. I'm done. So let me know if you guys have any others.
I have another hot take that a lot of people are potentially criticizing after last week's game that was way better than people projected, and that is pressure. I think people looked at that game saying, where in the world is our two edge rushers? They're not getting home, and there was a lot of negative vibes being thrown their way. And I would say when you look at the meat of the game and you actually get into individual plays, we were actually getting pressure a lot against, mind you, a very good offensive line.
Yeah, they are
potentially top three in the league. The last 2 weeks we've had the number one offensive line and maybe number three. They have very stout, very power-heavy offensive lines. And we were getting great pressure. We just were not getting home. And I think when you combine that with our maybe very cover six heavy or too high safety defense, I think it showed that we weren't doing very good in the secondary where they were able to get the the ball off pretty quickly, where we simply didn't have time to get home in the other context we might get later down this season. But pressure is looking very, very great. So I think here on out, we're going to face much more less superior offensive lines, and I think you're going to see that manifest itself in a lot of different ways. But props to the defense, specifically on the defensive line. Even Harrison Phillips and our other big boy up front, I'm blanking on his name, but they were doing very, very well. Tomlinson, I'm sorry.
Yep.
That entire defensive line looked very, very great. And I would say, I know a lot of people were angry with the cut of Armon Watts, but I think our defensive line is looking pretty stout. Now, I know we talked about signing Sue, but I think if we sign Sue, that might be good from a run defense standpoint, but at least from a pass pro or pass defense, we were doing really good up front.
Yep. All right. I want to talk about. I was texting with some friends, after the game. Not you guys, but some other folks, just about like game management and decision making. And it's just like our consensus was like Detroit's gonna Detroit on you, like. I do not understand trying the field goal there. Like, and I don't know that this is really going to be a great discussion for us because we're all going to agree on it. Like, it'd be awesome if we could have someone on here who would tell us that was a great move and we could like talk about it. But like, no one would say that.
Yeah.
How in the heat of the moment are these decisions getting made? And we talked about this last week, guys. We talked about some of these coaches, if they're not comfortable making these calls or they continuously make the wrong decisions, just give it to someone else on your staff that doesn't think about play calling, doesn't think about pregame speeches, doesn't think about arguing with the refs. Give it to someone else, because it was malpractice for Dan Campbell to kick a field goal there. It would be better to pooch punt that, to punt that. It would be better to throw an interception than to try a field goal in that position.
Yep.
And even if you make that field goal, which he's never made a field goal of that distance in his career, even if you make that field goal, the Vikings have over a minute to go and a touchdown still wins the game for them.
Exactly. And I've heard a lot of personalities in Minnesota talk about this week, how I think maybe it originated from Peyton Manning, but how when you're in that position, you're not just playing the game clock in the field on your own offense, you are playing the other team's head coach, and you are... if you're trying to go up 6, now you are tempting them to be super aggressive to go get a touchdown versus if you're only 3 ahead, there's an element that makes you a little bit more safe. Like, we just need a field goal. Don't throw a pick. Don't throw the game away. Right. You were asking them to be more passive against a team that has, at least this season, kind of a predisposition to be aggressive. So, total miss on Man Campbell's part.
They're 4 of 6 on 4th down anyway. Like I just like we can end the conversation here because we all agree, and I think our listeners are intelligent enough to probably see it the same way. But this is not a Monday morning armchair quarterback thing. This is like I'm sitting in a chair on a soccer field in Lakeville watching kids soccer, trying to watch this game, and I'm like, well, they're not, they're going to go for it here. Like, and he's trotting out the field goal team, a 54-yarder. Going the direction that the doors are open and it's windy. Like if I'm the owner, if I'm the Detroit Lions owner and I'm in the building watching this game, I'm pulling I can't pull my hair out, but if I could, I would. It's
even the message that sends to your offense. Like, we don't believe in you to go get another 4th down. Like, he's all about like being aggressive and being physical and tearing each other's kneecaps off. That doesn't preach that message. That shows that you're not putting your money where your mouth is.
And it's, you have the chance to make a game-winning play, right? Like we talked about, even if you make the field goal, you have not won the game.
No.
And as it turns out, the Vikings had no problem going down in 3 plays and scoring a touchdown on you. So I don't know why you thought a 6-point lead was any better than a 3-point lead. So I think he learned from it, and we've been hard enough on the guy. He seems like a really likable guy and a good coach. And he's certainly not listening to this, but I think he probably learned, and he did come out on Monday and say he regretted kicking the field goal, but like that doesn't do anything for you, and I heard him too. He's like, this loss is on me. And Kevin O'Connell said that in Philadelphia, this loss is on me. And I get it. Players love hearing that because it exonerates them from blame. But like, you can only have so many of this loss is on me moments before it's like the next loss is going to be on someone else because you're not here anymore.
100%. And not only did he lose the game in that moment, he also lost the division. Had they won the game, they would have been in first place in the division for the first time in history. Period.
Wow.
Like,
wow,
that was a very special game for them, and they tanked it.
Yeah, that's a big one. All right. So before we move on to looking around the NFC North, guys, the last thing here on this game is just in general, where do the Vikings stand? To put it basically, they are 2-1 and they are in first place in the division. I'm a little tenuous or skeptical on them at this moment, but to dovetail off of what Chase said, ugly losses are better than pretty wins. And at the end of the season, it's all about, we would always say when I was with the team, we'd come in after a win. And it's like another notch, got another notch on the belt, another notch on the belt, and you need 9 or 10 back in those days because it was a 16 game schedule. Now you probably need 10 or 11. You need 10 or 11 notches. And who cares how you got? Does not matter, right? So I get that part of it too. And the Vikings have 2. And I think at the beginning of the season, we all would have taken 2-1 after 3, right? Is that fair to say? All right. So I'm tenuous on it. There are some things I really don't like. But where do you guys think the team stands?
I would say going into the season, we talked about it before, that we knew there was going to be some learning curves both on offense and defense. You're installing new schemes on both sides of the ball. And although you do have some veteran players, and since you didn't play preseason, that's going to take a hot second to learn. So the fact that we were able to squeak out 2 wins, considering that we're in the learning curve process, I would say we're going to still be in it for maybe another game or 2. I'm taking that, honestly. Furthermore, when it comes to defense, I think there's one player in specific that we need in order for our scheme to be successful, and that person is Lewis Cine, because if you looked at it again this last game, we played 2 high safety very, very deep, similar to the way we did in the Eagles game, which tells me they are trying to be a bend but don't break offense. They're trying to, or defense, they're trying to remove those explosive plays like you mentioned, but they need to be able to be faster coming in from that 2 high safety, and right now they don't have that speed. Now, Lewis Cine, I don't know if you remember this from the draft, in his 40 time, if you take the first 10 yards of that play, or
10-yard split,
yeah, exactly. It was the fastest in draft history, period. Lewis Cine, he is so stinking fast when he learns how to do it, but at least from the rumors that I've been hearing is that he can't read the play fast enough yet. He's still learning, but once he learns it, I think that will be a game changer for this defense, where we'll still be able to play our default and be able to be very, very agnostic from a look before pre-snap, and then be able to go attack the ball once it is snapped. And we need Lewis Cine to be able to do that. That is honestly the crux of the entire thing right now, is that we're trying to limp along until he's ready, simply because we don't have the speed. But otherwise, definitely loving what we're seeing.
All right, great. Chase, how do you feel?
Well, so I'm looking at it from two points of view, and it's our record and then how we got to that record. 2-1 after 3, love it. I'm very okay with that. But then I look at our 3 games that we've played so far. Loved week 1, hated week 2, week 3, love and hate. So like I said, the learning curve that makes me feel a little better. But I wouldn't say I'm ecstatic about it so far. But I am definitely content. And I think I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful. I think I've seen enough good stuff to where I think they could carry us through the last 14 games and, have a successful season. But I'm not fully on board there yet.
I will amend my stance on it. I said I'm tenuous. I like the word Chase used, content. I think that's a good word for it. If you're a Vikings fan, you should be content. And you don't want to be content, like in week 15. Like, you want your hair to be on fire, like no one can stop you.
Sure.
They are not there, but they are not, they should not be, feeling down right now. I mean, they're 2-1 first place. So content's a good word for that, I think. I want to, Giles, you mentioned something when you were talking about Cine and the defense and, physically he can do it, but he's still learning to read it. And it just reminded me, when I was with the team, and how Mike Zimmer felt about Andrew Sendejo. And, Andrew was never like the type of physically gifted athlete in the NFL who would just change games for you, Obviously, he was a physically gifted athlete because he was in the NFL, but like relative to other athletes out there, I mean, he was a guy. But he was really an important part of the Vikings defense, and no one could ever really wrestle that starting job away from him ever, even though the Vikings did everything they could to upgrade from a physical standpoint at that spot. I mean, Anthony Harris eventually ended up getting it for very short term, but he didn't. I don't think he played as well as Andrew Sendejo played for a few seasons there. And what really opened my eyes to Sendejo and his role in the Mike Zimmer defense was a production meeting we had one time. I can't remember like who we were playing, what game it was, but it was a Monday night game, and it was like in 2017, 2016 or 17, and Sendejo was probably not going to play in the game, and we get through this production meeting, and Zim was kind of in a good mood, I think, or a playful mood, and he's like, you guys asked, I kept me here for, for an hour and a half. You asked me all these questions. You didn't even ask me about Sendejo. He might not play. And he basically, what he did was he took out a binder, and he said, this is what we're working with if Sendejo plays. This is what we can do. And then he took out another one and said, but this is what we can do if he doesn't play. And it was, a third of the size.
Wow.
And he's like, no one really knows it or appreciates it, but when he's in the game, I can do a lot more because he knows what we're doing. He can anticipate it. He's got great synergy with Harrison Smith, and he's like, not only is he great at all those things, but the replacement there is so far from that you're not even breaking even, you're not. And I just wondered, like, how many players are like that in the NFL, like that we don't really talk about very much, but like their coordinators or head coaches would say that about them. And the reason I bring this up is because what you were saying about Scene, where it's like, yeah, physically he can do it, but he's still learning, and that's okay. He's a rookie, but just think if he gets to a point where he can match, mentally with what he can do physically, the Vikings might have a special player there.
Yep. And specifically with our defensive scheme, because it's very clear that they have invested into jumpstart speed, not just someone who is fast, but someone that can break off the ball immediately at tremendous speed. And then after 10 yards, they've hit their stride, but someone that can move very, very quickly, quickly, both fast and quickly.
Yes.
So time will tell. I'll give it another couple weeks. Across all of our rookies, for that matter, I think there's still a few rookie elements that need improving, but we're still in that learning curve.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's take a peek around the NFL here. The mighty fall, and we can't be too hard on Buffalo. I mean, they lost to another team that's undefeated, but I mean, we talked about it. Everyone just let Buffalo skate to the postseason, skate to a division title, skate to the Super Bowl. Miami right now. I think Buffalo should have won the game. I think this is one they'll look back on and say that one hurt. We should have won that game, even though it was on the road. I just think Buffalo should have won it. Kansas City gets upset in Indianapolis. I think we all thought Indy was good before the season, but then they looked so bad. They came home, they were desperate, and they beat who I think is a better team, but they got the victory. I thought that was interesting. Something to be said for desperation. A team that's desperate playing at home. So watch Las Vegas this week. They are winless, and they're hosting Denver. Tampa Bay loses to Green Bay. Obviously, you can't be too hard on Tampa for this. Green Bay is a Super Bowl contender, but they did lose at home. And I don't think Tampa's offenses look good all season.
I agree.
You can be worried about Tampa's offense. So I'll leave it there. The mighty fall: Buffalo, Kansas City, and Tampa. Any thoughts on any of those three games?
I will say I'm not too concerned about Tampa's offense because I think they'll pick it up. I mean, they obviously were down a few players. Julio really hasn't made a ton of a splash since he's been there, and I think if you compare that to when Gronk came, Gronk wasn't very heavy on the first part of the season, so I expect that to pick up. Honestly, the bigger concern was they had so many penalties that cost the game. They should have won that game, in the last little bit there. But it's Tom Brady. He'll find a way to make it happen. Physically, I don't know what he's taking in his daily supplements, but he seems to be improving year over year when it comes to all the individual stats. He is just a beast. So we'll see when it comes to them. But honestly, the Colts, I went into the season viewing them as a dark horse for the Super Bowl title because I view Matt Ryan as a better quarterback than most people look at him, and I have a decently stacked roster. So I thought they'd be doing much better than they had been. So the first 2 weeks I was a bit surprised, but that third week that was a little bit of an enigma, especially for Kansas City.
Yeah, very strange. All right, big wins. Indy, we just talked about it. Confidence builder for them in a division that no one is running away with. So that was a really big moment for the Colts. Miami, we already talked about it, but Tua's got to, I think you got to watch his health. And the one thing that would concern me about Miami is Waddle and Hill in tandem is awesome with Tua. I don't know if I would love it if it was just Tua and one of those guys.
Agreed.
I don't
You
know
need
if
both.
I would love that. Yeah, I don't know if I would love that because I don't know what else there is there. Tennessee, I thought their win was a big win. I thought that was a huge deal for them to beat Oakland there. For them to go 0-3 would be a problem, I think. I think that'd be an issue.
Especially coming from the number 1 overall seed last year. Like that's a big place to fall from.
But that's where I was going because there was a little consternation with Tannehill. It's like they drafted a quarterback. It's not my job to mentor him. And all the talk about how devastating that loss was for him. And then you start 0-3 and you got the upstart Jaguars. And that would have been an issue, I think, going 0-3 for Tennessee. Wondering where Derrick Henry is, and losing Taylor Lewan for the Titans is trouble. But they did get a big win. And then lastly, Dallas. I thought their win was big. And the reason is, like, Dak's going to come back, and his layoff is not going to be so long that he's got to knock the rust off like Deshaun Watson's will be. It's like when Deshaun comes back, he's not just going to be Deshaun Watson. Like, it's going to take a bit. Dak can just come back and be Dak, I think. So any win that Dallas gets in his stead is just a bonus. I mean, they're just playing with house money with every win they get. And
especially in division.
Yes, and they're in division, and they're chasing the Eagles. So for them to get these NFC wins is key because I think they're fighting for a wild card. I don't think they're going to run the Eagles down. So I thought Dallas winning on Monday night was big. So those are my big wins of the week. Any thoughts on those games or any others before we move on and talk about New Orleans?
Lastly is a little bit more from a macro lens. How about the NFC East in general? Like, they were the dumpster fire division for the longest time, and finally they're competitive. So props to them.
Yeah, I agree. And Chase, I don't remember how you felt about the Eagles, but Giles was pro Eagles heading into the season. So Nostradamus over there on the Eagles. That was a good preseason tout. But Chase, I don't remember where you stood on them, but the Eagles look good.
Yeah, I'm really high on Jalen Hurts. He's been blessing my fantasy team this year.
But love it.
Yeah, Eagles are looking good, man. They're just, that connection with AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts is phenomenal. The O-line, the defense, Darius Slay embarrassed us. Not to talk about them the entire time. But before we move on, I do want to mention one more thing, and that's just, obviously, I think you're exactly right. I advantage Miami right now over Buffalo, but I just don't want to forget that Buffalo embarrassed the Super Bowl champs and embarrassed the AFC 1 seed in weeks 1 and 2.
You're right.
So, I mean, they lost to, almost like I don't want to say a technicality, but kind of a technicality.
Yeah.
They lost to Miami, but I still think they're a good team to beat in the AFC East and honestly the AFC. So I just want to make sure we're on the
Yeah, I think that's fairly stated. But Miami is probably feeling like it's, hey, we got lightning in a bottle. Let's keep this going. I think, like the Vikings in 2017. Like, I bet you there were some people who thought this is going to end. Like, they've caught lightning in a bottle. Case Keenum can't keep playing this way. They can't keep just giving up 16 points a game. It's going to go up, and it never did. Right? It just never did. And that's what I think we're looking at with Miami. Buffalo is the class of the division and probably the conference with respect to Kansas City. No doubt about it. I can't remember offhand where Buffalo plays this week, but I'm sure they're going to bounce back. And if you're inclined to gamble, I would the two things I would really look at is Buffalo, because there's something to be said for pro athletes after they get embarrassed or after they're pissed off, and then Vegas. I think you got to look at Vegas, a winless team at home against a division rival. Good spot to be in.
Yep.
All right, let's preview the New Orleans Saints here before we sign off. I have some pretty strong opinions on this one. Actually. So this game is in London, Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Central Time. Vikings are 2.5-point favorites. The over-under is 43.5. It's at Tottenham Hotspur, which is an outdoor stadium. I believe it's grass. So I don't love that for the Vikings. But this is technically a road game for the Vikings and a home game for the Saints, and it's a huge break to not have to play in New Orleans, because that's a significant home field advantage for a team that is leaning on its defense this year. So the Vikings catch a big break here, not having to play in New Orleans. I don't love them on the grass outdoors, but And I don't love that the Vikings are waiting so long to get to London, and the Saints went early. I think that's the better play. All that being said, I I think this is a good spot for the Vikings. I think 2.5 is way too low. If I was in Vegas or if I was in a sport or a state where you could bet on, sports, the Vikings would be a strong play here. I think this line is suppressed because Dalvin is questionable and because it's a neutral site and you're traveling to London. But I don't think Dalvin's exclusion would be a huge deal. No disrespect to him, but the level of replacement is very high with Alexander Mattison, and this is a Kirk Cousins, Kevin O'Connell, Justin Jefferson production. This is not a we need to run the ball or we're screwed situation. So I think that angle gets overplayed, and I think this line is too low. I love the Vikings in this spot. I've got a few more takes on this, but I'll just stop there and kind of open the floor to you guys. But I love this spot for the Vikings. Having won the game the way they did against Detroit, I think is going to help them too.
Yep, and I think you said it best. I think this might be a true Justin Jefferson show because, like you said before, athletes don't like getting embarrassed, and I think Justin Jefferson has felt embarrassed the last 2 weeks. Now, I think they were committing far more penalties than what were called during the game, but he was glued, or they were glued to him. But I think he is going to find a way to go shove it down the Saints' throat. And I think it's going to be a big game for JJ.
Well, yeah, and Chase, I don't know how you feel about that, but or if you wanted to go to a different topic, but off of what Giles was saying, it's a cool matchup with Lattimore, right?
For sure.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I think Jefferson's due for a big game. I think he's the type of player too. I think, like you said, all athletes, they don't like being embarrassed, but I think there's certain athletes who don't like it more, and I think Justin Jefferson is one of those athletes. I think he knows exactly what's happening. I think he understands what fans and what other players are thinking of him right now, and I think he's going to go out there and have a fire under him and try to embarrass them.
Yep, and let's not forget he's also gunning for a new contract this offseason, so he wants to show up and show out.
And Kevin O'Connell, I believe, and I don't know him, I've never met him, but I believe if Sean McVay, if there's any Sean McVay in him, which we have to believe there is, without your compass not pointing north anymore, they are able to empathize with a player like Justin Jefferson who wants to have a big game and then cater to that without sabotaging the team's effort, and without cutting your nose to spite your face. I think Kevin O'Connell has a little bit of, I got your back, JJ. We got you on this. We'll help you. And so a couple of other points on this one. The one thing I'll leave this one. I'll leave that point for the end. The game wrecker, the potential game wrecker for the Vikings. I'll leave to the end. But I think New Orleans defense is tough and a handful and may take some figuring out for the Vikings. I think their offense is shaky. I think this is the Tampa Bay Jameis Winston. I don't think this is the Jameis Winston that New Orleans hopes he can be. I think he's dealing with an injury. Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry dealing with injuries. I don't know Kamara's status. And so I feel like this is almost like a get-right game for the Vikings defense. I think the Saints offensive line, is not as good as it has been in recent seasons. So if this game was at US Bank Stadium, I think the Saints would be in big trouble. But the Vikings won't have that advantage. I still think it's a get-right game for the Vikings defense. The last thing I'll say, the potential game wrecker here, though, for the Vikings is Cam Jordan. The guy plays well against Minnesota for whatever reason. I'm not going to go so far as to say it's because his dad used to play here and he's got a bunch of family that always comes to Viking Saints games. I don't know what it is. It's just a matchup that favors him, whatever. He's also just a damn good player. And I haven't looked at the injury report. I presume he's playing. I don't know of any injury he's dealing with, but he's a guy who can ruin the game for the Vikings. So as long as they take care of Cam Jordan, and they don't just lose their minds on defense, I think the Vikings are in a great spot here.
Yep. I would reckon to say that his face is big on the board throughout the course of this week. How do we stop this guy?
Yeah, exactly right. So prediction-wise, I think the Vikings cover this spread easily. I think they win by a touchdown, if not more. I think they win going away. In fact, I think it's, to use another basketball reference for my guy Chase, you know how it's a close basketball game but then it ends up being like a 12 or 15-point game because it's fouling at the end and a bunch of free throws. Like this is like maybe a touchdown game or so, but then it's like a 14-point game or a 17-point game when it's all said and done because New Orleans gets desperate. They're throwing passes. They're never running it. We're teeing off on pass rush. You know, we're kicking field goals at the end. We're being conservative, and it just turns into an ugly situation. That's what I see here. You know, I think the total's about right at 43.5 because I don't think the Saints are going to get to 20. I think they're going to be at 10 or 14 or something like that. So the total I wouldn't really mess with, but I think the Vikings cruise in this game. How about you guys?
I would agree. I'm projecting 27-13 Vikings.
Sure.
I think we'll show up on both sides of the ball and put them away nicely. It'll still be a challenge, don't get me wrong, but
yeah, I think it will be like for like the first quarter and a half, 2 quarters, but like I said, it gets to be that free throw type of game, you know. Chase?
Mm-hmm. I think I'm going to go 28-17 Vikings. I don't think there's going to be too much here that we got to worry about, but I think our key is definitely to make Jameis Winston uncomfortable. Because I think he's, for all respect to Jameis Winston, I think he's their problem. I look at the wide receivers, and they got a couple of guys, whether they play or not, you know, Michael Thomas, Olave, Callaway, Landry, like they have a decent receiver room.
Yeah.
I just think Jameis Winston is a 30-30 quarterback. So it's going to get you as many interceptions as he gets you touchdowns.
Yeah.
And I think if we can make him uncomfortable, he's going to make a lot of bad decisions. So if we can do that, I think we'll win by, you know, maybe 10 plus even. So, and I think we will. I think obviously they have they're game planning a lot more than I am. So
yeah,
I'm assuming they
well,
know that, so.
it's a big spot for the Vikings here. Let's not put the cart before the horse. But you know, they got the Bears. They got the Bears next week, you know, and we didn't really take a close look at the NFC North. We did talk about Green Bay a little bit and obviously Detroit a bunch, but I think Chicago's passing yards for the season is 297 for the season. Okay. 4 interceptions, 10 sacks, like Vikings at home. I think
maybe the easiest game all season, if we're being completely honest.
So I think it is. So you'll beat New Orleans 3-1, probably going to beat the Bears at home 4-1, and then I think you go to Miami for a really big game. So that's what I think you're looking at here in Vikings Nation, and that's really a lot of fun. So a really big opportunity for the Vikings here in London as they go to play the New Orleans Saints. Again, that kickoff, remember, folks, is Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Central Time from London. Should be fun. Just like episode 6 of the WobCast 2.0 was fun. My thanks to Giles and Chase. Did we empty our notebooks? You guys good?
Yeah, we're good to go.
All right, sweet. Thank you guys for listening to the WobCast 2.0. This was episode 6. Episode 7 will come next week when we break down the Vikings and the Saints game. Hopefully a big victory for the Purple. You can find the WobCast 2.0 where you find all of your favorite podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube. You can also find us on Twitter at Wobby on Twitter. Please send us some tweets, questions, and thoughts so we can include what you want in future shows. You can also email us at therealwobcast@gmail.com. We love when fans and listeners drive the content, so we encourage you guys to do that. And we encourage you to continue listening by downloading and subscribing to the WobCast 2.0. For my partners, Giles and Chase, this is Wobby signing off for now. Vikings Saints Sunday at 8:30. Watch the game and then come back here and talk about it with us. Skol Vikings.